The cold autumn wind whipped around Abigail Blackburn as she stood on the auction block, her wrists bound with rough rope that chafed her delicate skin. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she refused to give the gathering crowd the satisfaction of seeing her break. It was 1875 in Elko, Nevada, and at 22 years old, Abigail was being sold like cattle by the man who had vowed to love her forever. Next up, one Abigail Blackburn, the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying across the dusty town square. 4 years married, healthy as a horse, good with cooking and cleaning. Only one defect to speak of, barren as the desert. He spat the last words as if they left a bad taste in his mouth. Abigail flinched. The humiliation burned worse than the midday sun. Her husband Thomas had wed her with promises of love and devotion, but when years passed without a child, his affection turned to resentment. Last week, he'd informed her coldly that he needed a wife who could give him sons, not a burden to feed and clothe with nothing to show for it. Bidding starts at $50, the auctioneer continued, eyeing the crowd of mostly men ranchers, miners, and drifters looking for a woman to cook their meals and warm their beds. Abigail kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to look at the faces of those bidding on her life. $50, a voice called out from the back. 60. Another joined in. The bidding continued, each shout making Abigail's stomach clench tighter. She knew what most of these men wanted: a servant by day and more by night. She'd heard horror stories of women sold to cruel masters who worked them to death or worse. $100, a deep voice called out, silencing the crowd. Abigail's eyes darted to the source. A tall man stood at the edge of the gathering, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dust-covered duster coat. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his hat, but she could see the strong line of his jaw covered in a short beard. 100 going once, the auctioneer said eagerly, surprised by the high bid. 120. A portly man with sweat stains beneath his armpits called out. 200, the stranger countered immediately. The crowd murmured. $200 was a substantial sum, enough to buy prime livestock or several months of supplies. 200 going once, going twice. Sold. To the gentleman in the back. Relief and fear warred within Abigail's chest. Who was this man who had paid so much? What would he expect from her? The stranger approached the auction block, his spurs jingling with each step. As he came closer, Abigail got her first good look at him. He appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s, with penetrating blue eyes that stood out against his sun-bronzed skin. He wasn't handsome in the traditional sense. His nose had been broken at some point, and a thin scar ran along his left cheek, but there was something compelling about his face. Nathan Keegan, he introduced himself to the auctioneer, pulling out a leather pouch and counting out the money. I'll take her papers. The auctioneer handed over the bill of sale, a document that transferred ownership of Abigail from her husband to this stranger. It made her sick to her stomach to be reduced to property. Nathan turned to her, and for the first time, his eyes met hers. To her surprise, there wasn't cruelty or lust in his gaze, but something else she couldn't quite identify. "Can you ride, Miss Blackburn?" he asked, his voice softer than she expected. "Yes," she managed to say, her throat dry from hours without water. He nodded, then reached up to untie her wrists. His fingers were calloused but gentle as he freed her from the binding. "My ranch is a few hours' ride from town. We should head out now if we want to make it before dark." He led her through the dispersing crowd, ignoring the curious and sometimes envious glances from the other men. At the hitching post stood 2 horses, a powerful black stallion and a chestnut mare. "The mare is yours," Nathan said, helping her onto the saddle before mounting his own horse. Her name is Penny. She's gentle but sure-footed." Abigail sat stiffly on the mare, uncertain what to say or do. This man had just bought her, owned her now, yet he was treating her with a courtesy she hadn't expected. They rode out of Elko in silence, following a trail that led into the foothills. The landscape was breathtaking, sagebrush plains giving way to aspen groves just beginning to turn golden with the autumn chill. Ordinarily, Abigail would have appreciated the beauty, but her mind was too consumed with worry about what awaited her at the end of this journey. After riding for nearly an hour without speaking, Nathan finally broke the silence. "I know you must be scared, Miss Blackburn. I want you to know that I don't intend you any harm." "Then why did you buy me?" she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. He was quiet for a moment, as if considering his answer carefully. "I was in town for supplies when I saw the notice for the auction. It didn't sit right with me, seeing a woman sold because she couldn't bear children. So you bought me out of pity." The idea stung her pride more than she expected. "No, not pity." He adjusted his hat, squinting at the horizon. "Let's just say I know what it's like to be judged for something beyond your control." Before she could ask what he meant, he changed the subject. "My ranch isn't much, about 500 acres with a small herd of cattle and some horses I breed and train. There's a separate cabin about 100 yards from the main house. It was built for a ranch hand, but it's been empty for a while. It's yours if you want it." Abigail stared at him in disbelief. "You're giving me my own place to stay?" "Yes. You'll have privacy there." He paused, then added, "I don't need heirs, Miss Blackburn, just someone to help with the cooking and keeping the place in order. That's all I expect from you." She didn't know whether to believe him. Men had lied to her before. Thomas had promised to love her forever, only to discard her when she failed to conceive. "And if I want to leave?" she dared to ask. Nathan looked at her directly then, his blue eyes serious. "I won't stop you." "But where would you go? A woman alone has few options in these parts." He was right, and they both knew it. Without money or family to turn to, her chances of survival on her own were slim. "Give it 3 months, he suggested. "Work for me, earn your keep. If you're still unhappy after that time, I'll give you enough money to take you wherever you want to go." It was more than fair, more than she had expected. 3 months, she agreed cautiously. They continued riding, and as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, a ranch came into view nestled in a valley between 2 hills. A 2-story log house stood proudly at the center, with a large barn, several corrals, and a smaller cabin a short distance away, just as Nathan had described. As they approached, Abigail noticed the care that had gone into the place: the well-maintained fences, the neat woodpile stacked against the barn, the autumn flowers still blooming in boxes beneath the main house's windows. It spoke of someone who took pride in their home. "Welcome to the Double K Ranch," Nathan said as they rode through the gate. "It's not much compared to some of the bigger spreads, but it's mine." There was unmistakable pride in his voice, and Abigail felt a small twinge of envy. To have something of your own, something no one could take from you, seemed like an impossible luxury at that moment. Nathan dismounted and came to help her down from her horse. "Let me show you to your cabin, and then we can see about getting you something to eat. You must be hungry." The cabin was simple but clean, with a small stove, a bed with a fresh mattress, a table with 2 chairs, and a chest of drawers. There was even a small bookshelf with a few worn volumes. "It's not much," Nathan said, watching her reaction, "but you can make it your own. There are some linens in the chest, and I can bring you water for washing up." "Thank you," Abigail said quietly, still trying to make sense of this unexpected turn of events. Just that morning she had been a wife, then she had become property to be sold, and now she was. What exactly? Not quite a servant, not quite free. I'll let you get settled, Nathan said, moving toward the door. Come to the main house when you're ready and we'll have supper. After he left, Abigail sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she had been holding back all day to fall. She cried for her lost dignity, for the betrayal by the man she had trusted, for the uncertain future that lay ahead. But beneath the fear and grief, there was also a tiny flicker of something else: relief. Relief that she had not fallen into the hands of one of the leering men at the auction. Relief that Nathan Keegan seemed, at least for now, to be a decent sort of man. She washed her face in the basin of water Nathan had provided, changed into the cleanest dress from the small bundle of possessions she'd been allowed to bring, and took a deep breath. Whatever this new life held for her, she would face it with as much strength as she could muster. She had survived the humiliation of the auction block. She would survive this too. The main house was warm and inviting when Abigail entered. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and delicious smells wafted from the kitchen area at the back of the large main room. "Hope you like venison stew," Nathan said, looking up from the pot he was stirring. "I'm not much of a cook, but this is one of the few things I can manage without burning." "I can cook," Abigail offered, moving closer to the stove. "That was one of my duties before," Nathan nodded. "I'd appreciate that. Been living on my own, cooking for too long." He gestured to the table already set for two. "Have a seat. It's almost ready." The stew was surprisingly good, rich with tender meat and root vegetables. Abigail hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful hit her tongue. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons against bowls and the occasional pop from the fireplace. "How long have you lived here?" Abigail asked finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. "About 5 years now," Nathan replied, tearing off a piece of bread. "Bought the place after I finished my time with the army. It was run down back then, hardly more than a shack and some broken fences." "You've done a fine job with it," she said sincerely. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but worth it." He paused, then asked, "How long were you married?" 4 years, Abigail answered, her appetite suddenly diminishing at the reminder. "We were childhood sweethearts. I thought," she stopped, not wanting to reveal too much of her heartbreak to this stranger. Nathan seemed to understand her reluctance. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." "Thank you." She pushed her bowl away, having eaten enough to satisfy her hunger. "What will my duties be here?" "Cooking, cleaning, general upkeep of the house," Nathan listed. "I'm gone most days tending to the herd or training horses, so you'll have the place to yourself." "I don't expect you to work yourself to exhaustion, just keep things in order." It sounded reasonable enough. "I can do that." "Good." He stood, collecting their empty bowls. "There's one more thing I should mention." He paused, his expression serious. "My sister Alice visits sometimes with her husband and children. They live about 20 miles east of here. If anyone asks, you're a widow I hired as a housekeeper. I don't want anyone knowing how you came to be here." Abigail was surprised by his consideration. He was protecting her reputation, what was left of it anyway. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate that." Nathan nodded once, almost awkwardly, as if uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's getting late. You should get some rest. Mornings start early here." Abigail returned to her cabin, her mind swirling with the events of the day. As she lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the shadows cast by the lamplight, she wondered what kind of man Nathan Keegan really was. He seemed decent enough, but she had been fooled before by a handsome face and kind words. Only time would tell if she had traded one form of bondage for another. The next morning, Abigail woke at dawn to the sound of movement outside her cabin. Peering through the small window, she saw Nathan leading his black stallion from the barn, already dressed for a day's work. He mounted the horse with the easy grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle and rode off toward the eastern pastures. Determined to prove her worth, Abigail dressed quickly and made her way to the main house. The kitchen was a disaster, dirty dishes piled in the sink, food remnants stuck to surfaces, and a layer of dust covering everything that didn't see regular use. It was clear that Nathan had been living as a bachelor for quite some time. Rolling up her sleeves, Abigail set to work. She stoked the fire in the stove, put on water to boil for coffee, and began attacking the accumulated grime. By mid-morning, the kitchen was spotless, and she had moved on to the main living area, sweeping out months of dust and arranging the haphazardly placed furniture into a more orderly configuration. She found a pantry stocked with basic supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, and preserved meats enough to prepare simple meals. There was a vegetable garden behind the house, somewhat neglected but still producing, and she spent part of the afternoon harvesting what she could before the first frost could claim it. By the time Nathan returned late in the afternoon, Abigail had prepared a proper meal: roast rabbit, found in a trap near the garden, fresh biscuits and vegetables from the garden. Nathan stopped in the doorway, his hat in his hands, staring at the transformed house and the meal laid out on the table. "You've been busy," he said, his tone betraying his surprise. "I wanted to earn my keep," Abigail replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Dinner is ready whenever you are." He washed up at the basin by the door, the water turning brown with the day's dust. "Smells good," he commented as he sat down at the table. "Been a long time since I've had a proper meal like this." They ate together, the silence between them more comfortable than it had been the previous night. Abigail found herself studying Nathan when he wasn't looking, the way his strong hands handled the utensils with surprising delicacy. The thoughtful furrow of his brow as he savored the food, the occasional glance he cast her way when he thought she wouldn't notice. "This is delicious," he said, reaching for a second biscuit. "You're a fine cook, Miss Blackburn. Thank you, and please call me Abigail." The formality seemed unnecessary given their unusual circumstances. He nodded. "Abigail, then, and you should call me Nathan." After dinner, Nathan insisted on helping with the dishes, despite Abigail's protests that it was part of her job. They worked side by side at the sink, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed dishes back and forth. Each accidental touch sent an unexpected shiver through Abigail, a reaction she immediately tried to suppress. He was her employer, nothing more, and she had learned the hard way that trusting men led only to heartbreak. Days turned into weeks as autumn deepened around the Double K Ranch. The aspens shed their golden leaves, and the mornings grew frosty. Abigail settled into a routine: cooking, cleaning, tending the garden before it succumbed to winter, and occasionally helping with lighter ranch chores. Nathan was gone most days, working with the cattle or the horses he trained, but they shared meals morning and evening, gradually growing more comfortable in each other's presence. Abigail learned bits and pieces about Nathan's past during these shared meals. He had served in the army for several years after the Civil War, stationed at various forts throughout the West. He had saved every penny of his pay to buy the ranch, dreaming of a place he could call his own. He spoke little of his family, only mentioning that his parents had died when he was young, leaving just him and his sister Alice. What he didn't speak about was why a man his age remained unmarried, or why he had really purchased Abigail at the auction. Despite his initial explanation, she suspected there was more to it than simple decency. But she didn't press him, content for now with the peaceful existence they had established. One evening, about a month after Abigail's arrival, Nathan returned from town with supplies and an unexpected gift, a small stack of books. "I noticed you had read through all the ones on the shelf in your cabin," he explained somewhat sheepishly when he presented them to her. "Thought you might like some new ones." Abigail ran her fingers over the leather-bound volumes, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said softly. "Reading has always been my escape." "From what?" he asked, his blue eyes curious. She hesitated, then decided to answer honestly. "From disappointment, mostly. When I was a girl, I would read to escape the fact that my father preferred my brothers. When I was married, I read to escape the growing coldness in Thomas's eyes each month when he realized I wasn't with child." Nathan's expression darkened. "Your husband was a fool." "Was he?" Abigail asked bitterly. "A man wants sons to carry on his name, his legacy. I couldn't give him that." "A man should want a wife for more than her ability to bear children," Nathan countered firmly. "There's more to a woman's worth than that." Abigail looked up at him, surprised by the vehemence in his voice. "Is there? Not according to most men I've known." "Then you've known the wrong men." Nathan's gaze held hers for a long moment before he looked away, suddenly awkward. "I should check on the horses before turning in." "Good night, Abigail." As he left, Abigail sat by the fire with the books in her lap, pondering his words. Could it be true that not all men measured a woman's worth by her fertility? Or was Nathan simply saying what he thought she wanted to hear? The first snowfall came in early December, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. Abigail stood on the porch of the main house, watching the flakes drift down from a leaden sky. The world seemed hushed, as if holding its breath. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Nathan's voice came from behind her as he joined her on the porch. "Yes," she agreed. "Though I imagine it makes your work more difficult." He shrugged. "The cattle are in the sheltered pastures for the winter, and I've got enough hay stored to see them through until spring. The horses don't mind the snow much." He looked at her, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You know, I don't think I've seen you genuinely smile since you arrived here." Abigail was taken aback by the observation. "I haven't had much cause for smiling these past few years." "That's a shame." His voice was gentle. "You have a beautiful face. I imagine your smile would light it up." Heat rose to Abigail's cheeks at the unexpected compliment. "I should start dinner," she said quickly, turning to go back inside. "Abigail," Nathan called after her, causing her to pause. "Christmas is coming soon. Is there anything special you'd like?" The question caught her off guard. Thomas had rarely bothered with gifts, even on Christmas. "I don't need anything," she answered automatically. "That's not what I asked." Nathan's expression was patient. "What would you like?" "If you could have anything reasonable, what would it be?" Abigail thought for a moment, then answered truthfully. "A warm shawl, perhaps. Mine is rather worn." Nathan nodded. "A shawl it is, then." He smiled, and for a moment, the hardness that usually lined his face softened, making him look younger. That evening, as Abigail prepared for bed in her cabin, she found herself thinking about Nathan's smile and the way it transformed his face. She was becoming dangerously comfortable in his presence, looking forward to their conversations over meals, appreciating his quiet strength and unexpected moments of kindness. She reminded herself firmly that she was here on borrowed time. Their arrangement was for 3 months, and almost half of that time had already passed. Soon, she would need to decide whether to stay or use the money Nathan had promised to start a new life elsewhere. The thought of leaving the ranch filled her with an unexpected sadness. The week before Christmas, Alice Keegan arrived with her husband Frank and their 2 children, a boy of about 10 and a girl around 8. Nathan had mentioned they would be visiting, but Abigail still felt nervous as she watched the wagon approach from the window of the main house. "Don't worry," Nathan said, noting her apprehension. "Alice knows you're a housekeeper I hired. She'll be kind." True to his word, Alice, a pretty woman with the same striking blue eyes as her brother, welcomed Abigail warmly. "It's about time Nathan hired someone to help around here," she said as she embraced Abigail. "The place looks wonderful. He's lucky to have found you." Frank, a sturdy man with a friendly smile, shook Abigail's hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Blackburn. Nathan's told us good things about you." "Thank you," Abigail replied, playing her part as the widowed housekeeper. "It's lovely to meet you all." The children, James and Emma, were initially shy around Abigail but soon warmed to her when she produced fresh baked cookies from the kitchen. The little family brought a welcome liveliness to the ranch, filling the house with laughter and conversation. That evening, after the children had been put to bed in the spare room upstairs, the adults sat around the fireplace drinking coffee. Abigail had excused herself to return to her cabin, feeling it wasn't her place to join the family gathering, but Nathan had insisted she stay. "You've worked hard preparing for their visit," he said. "You deserve to relax and enjoy the company." Alice watched the interaction with interest, a knowing look in her eyes that made Abigail uncomfortable. When Nathan and Frank stepped outside to check on a noise from the barn, Alice leaned closer to Abigail. "How are you really doing here?" she asked quietly. "Is my brother treating you well?" "Yes, very well," Abigail assured her. "He's a kind employer." Alice studied her for a moment. "You know, Nathan's never hired a housekeeper before, despite my years of suggesting it." She smiled. "He's always been fiercely independent, determined to manage on his own since we lost our parents." "He mentioned they died when you were young," Abigail said cautiously, not wanting to pry but curious to learn more about Nathan's past. "Yes, during a fever outbreak when I was 14 and Nathan was 16. Alice's expression grew somber. "He took care of me, worked odd jobs to keep us fed until I married Frank. He spent his whole life looking after others, first me, then his men in the army, now his animals." She looked directly at Abigail. It would be nice to see someone looking after him for a change. Before Abigail could respond, the men returned, bringing a gust of cold air with them. The conversation turned to other topics, but Alice's words lingered in Abigail's mind. Later that night, as Abigail walked back to her cabin through the gently falling snow, she found herself accompanied by Nathan, who insisted on escorting her with a lantern. "Your sister is lovely," Abigail commented. "You must be proud of her." "I am," Nathan agreed. "She's made a good life with Frank. Their children are a blessing." There was something in his tone, a wistfulness that made Abigail ask, "Have you never wanted children of your own?" Nathan was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I did once, but some things aren't meant to be." They had reached her cabin door. The lantern light cast golden patterns on the snow around their feet, and their breath mingled in the cold air between them. "What happened?" Abigail asked gently. Nathan's eyes met hers, and she saw pain there, old but still present. "I was engaged before I bought this ranch. Her name was Catherine. We had plans, dreams." He looked away. "She died of pneumonia the winter before we were to be married." "I'm so sorry," Abigail whispered, her heart aching for him. "It was a long time ago." He straightened his shoulders as if physically setting aside the memory. "Good night, Abigail. Good night, Nathan." She watched him walk back toward the main house, his figure gradually disappearing into the swirling snow, and felt a new understanding of the quiet rancher who had purchased her freedom. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Abigail rose early to prepare a special breakfast for Nathan and his visiting family. When she entered the main house, she found the children already awake, excitedly examining the small gifts that had been placed beneath a modest pine tree set up in the corner of the main room. "Merry Christmas, Abigail," Emma called when she saw her, running over to take her hand. "Uncle Nathan said you might have a present too." Surprised, Abigail allowed the child to lead her to the tree. Sure enough, there was a carefully wrapped package with her name on it. She glanced up to find Nathan watching her, a hint of nervousness in his expression. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside the wrapping was a shawl of the finest wool Abigail had ever seen, dyed a rich blue that reminded her of summer skies. She ran her fingers over the soft material in awe. "It's beautiful," she said, looking up at Nathan with genuine emotion. "Thank you. The color matches your eyes," he said quietly, so only she could hear. Abigail felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the shawl. Impulsively, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small package of her own. "I have something for you too." Nathan looked genuinely surprised as he accepted the gift. Unwrapping it, he revealed a hand-knitted scarf in a deep green wool. Abigail had worked on it in secret during the evenings in her cabin, using yarn she had found in the attic of the main house. "You made this?" he asked, running his thumb over the neat stitches. "Yes." She suddenly felt shy. "It's not much, but I noticed your old one was rather threadbare." "It's perfect," he said, immediately wrapping it around his neck. "Thank you, Abigail." Their eyes met, and for a moment the rest of the room, the excited children, Alice and Frank exchanging their own gifts, faded away. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection that both thrilled and frightened Abigail. The moment was broken by James calling for his uncle to see his new pocket knife. Nathan turned away, but not before Abigail caught the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The day passed in a haze of good food, laughter, and the simple joy of being part of a family celebration, even if Abigail was only there as the housekeeper. As evening fell, Nathan brought out a fiddle that Abigail hadn't known he owned. "Play for us, Uncle Nathan," Emma pleaded, and with a self-deprecating smile, he tucked the instrument under his chin and began to play. Abigail was astonished by the beauty of the music that flowed from the fiddle. Nathan played with his eyes closed, his strong hands suddenly delicate as they coaxed melodies from the strings, first lively tunes that had the children dancing around the room, then slower, more wistful songs that seemed to speak of longing and hope. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before Alice spoke. "I haven't heard you play like that in years," she said softly. Nathan shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Haven't had much occasion to play." That night, after the rest of the household had gone to bed, Abigail found herself unable to sleep. She wrapped the new shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside her cabin. The night was clear, the stars sharp and bright in the black sky, the snow reflecting their light so that the world seemed painted in silver. She wasn't entirely surprised when she heard footsteps crunching in the snow behind her. Turning, she found Nathan approaching, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No." She pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders. "It was a lovely day, thank you for including me, of course." He stood beside her, looking up at the stars. "You belong here, Abigail." The simple statement stirred something deep within her. "Do I?" He turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "Our 3 months is almost up. Have you decided what you want to do?" Abigail had been avoiding thinking about it, but the question could no longer be postponed. "I don't know," she admitted. "When I first came here, I thought I might want to leave, start fresh somewhere no one knows me. But now—" "Now," he prompted gently when she trailed off. "Now I'm not so sure." She looked up at him, gathering her courage. "I've found a peace here that I didn't expect. I'm glad." His voice was rough with emotion. "I want you to stay, Abigail. As your housekeeper," she asked, needing to be clear about what he was offering. Nathan took a step closer. "If that's what you want, but I was hoping." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I was hoping you might consider staying as more than that." Abigail's heart began to race. "What are you saying, Nathan?" "I'm saying that these past months with you have been the happiest I've known in years." He reached out tentatively, touching her cheek with a gentle hand. "I didn't expect to feel this way again after Catherine. I didn't think I could. But you've brought something back to life in me that I thought was gone forever." Abigail leaned into his touch, torn between hope and fear. "I was sold because I couldn't give my husband children. I can't give you any either. Don't you want a family, heirs for your ranch?" "I don't need heirs, Abigail." His eyes held hers, sincere and unwavering. "Just you. I've spent my life taking care of others, my sister, my men in the army. For once I want something for myself, and what I want is you if you'll have me." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of trusting again, of being hurt." "I know," he said, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "And I won't rush you. Stay, give us time to know each other better. If you never want more than friendship, I'll accept that. But please don't leave." Abigail looked into his face, this man who had rescued her from humiliation, who had given her back her dignity, who asked for nothing in return except the chance to care for her. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll stay." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was like the sunrise, transforming his features. "Thank you," he said simply, standing there in the starlight, the snow sparkling around them. Abigail felt something unfurling in her chest, a cautious hope, a fragile beginning. Whatever the future held, she would face it here, at the Double K Ranch, with Nathan Keegan. Winter settled fully over the ranch in January, bringing with it howling blizzards that confined them to the house for days at a time. Nathan had insisted that Abigail stay in the spare room of the main house during the worst of the weather, concerned about her being isolated in the cabin if she fell ill or needed help. These forced periods of close proximity accelerated the tentative relationship growing between them. They spent long evenings by the fire reading, talking, or simply enjoying comfortable silence. Nathan taught Abigail to play chess, grinning with delight when she eventually began to beat him. Abigail, in turn, coaxed more music from him, listening with rapt attention as he played his fiddle. By February, the nature of their relationship had evolved beyond employer and housekeeper, though Nathan was true to his word about not rushing her. He was unfailingly respectful, never presuming, always allowing Abigail to set the pace of their growing closeness. The most he had ventured was to hold her hand occasionally as they sat by the fire, or to brush a chaste kiss against her forehead when they parted for the night. It was Abigail who finally bridged the remaining distance between them one evening, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. She turned to him, took his face between her mittened hands, and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that started tentative but quickly deepened as Nathan responded with carefully restrained passion. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice husky. "I'm sure," she answered, surprised by her own certainty. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by the warmth that filled her whenever Nathan was near. "I think I've been falling in love with you since Christmas." His smile was radiant. "I've loved you since the day you transformed my bachelor chaos into a real home. I just didn't know how to tell you without frightening you away." Their courtship proceeded with sweet deliberation through the remainder of the winter. Nathan was a gentle, attentive suitor, treating Abigail with a reverence that healed old wounds she hadn't realized were still raw. They learned each other's stories, shared dreams and fears, built a foundation of trust that grew stronger with each passing day. In late March, as the first hints of spring began to soften the winter's grip on the land, Nathan asked Abigail to marry him. It was not a grand proposal, just the two of them walking along a creek where the ice had begun to break up, revealing glimpses of flowing water beneath. "I know it hasn't been that long," he said, holding both her hands in his, "and if you want to wait, I'll understand. But I love you, Abigail. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Abigail looked into his honest blue eyes and felt the last of her reservations melt away. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Nathan." He gathered her into his arms then, kissing her with a joy that left them both laughing and breathless. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted sheepishly. "I'll ride into town tomorrow." "I don't need a fancy ring," Abigail assured him. "Just you." Nevertheless, Nathan returned from town the next day with a delicate gold band set with a small sapphire. "It reminded me of your eyes," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. They were married in April, with Alice and Frank and their children as witnesses, along with a few of Nathan's neighboring ranchers and their wives. The ceremony was held on the porch of the main house, with wildflowers just beginning to bloom in the meadows beyond. Abigail wore a new dress of pale blue, with her dark hair loose around her shoulders the way Nathan liked it best. Nathan, clean-shaven for the occasion, looked handsome and slightly nervous in a new suit, his green scarf, Abigail's Christmas gift, tucked into his breast pocket as a token of their journey together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed his bride with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance dabbed at their eyes. There was a small celebration afterward, a feast prepared by Abigail with Alice's help. Music played by Nathan and some of the more musical guests, dancing that continued until the stars came out. Later, when the guests had departed and they were finally alone, Nathan carried Abigail across the threshold of the main house, now truly their home together. "Happy?" he asked, setting her gently on her feet in the bedroom they would now share. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation for Abigail. Where Thomas had been impatient and often rough, concerned only with his own pleasure and the possibility of conception, Nathan was gentle and generous, focused entirely on her comfort and satisfaction. For the first time, she understood that lovemaking could be a true expression of love and not just a duty to be endured. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head pillowed on his chest, Abigail whispered, "Do you ever regret that I can't give you children?" Nathan tightened his arms around her. "No," he said firmly. "I meant what I said that first day, Abigail. I don't need heirs, just you." He kissed the top of her head. "Besides, there are other ways to build a family if we decide we want that someday." The year that followed was the happiest of Abigail's life. She and Nathan settled into marriage with a natural ease that surprised them both. The ranch prospered under their joint care, Nathan focusing on the cattle and horses, Abigail managing the household and starting a thriving vegetable garden and chicken coop that provided additional income when she sold the excess in town. Their love deepened with each passing day, growing from the initial spark of attraction into something solid and enduring. They had their disagreements. Of course, Nathan could be stubborn and sometimes withdrew into silence when troubled, while Abigail had a tendency to worry about problems until they seemed insurmountable. But they learned to navigate these differences with patience and humor. In the fall, almost a year after they were married, fate intervened in an unexpected way. Nathan returned from Elko one afternoon with a somber expression that immediately concerned Abigail. "What's wrong?" she asked as he entered the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. "There was a tragedy in town," he said, sinking into a chair at the table. "A young couple passing through on their way to California. Their wagon overturned at the river crossing. The husband was killed instantly." "How awful," Abigail murmured, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "And the wife? She's alive, but badly injured. Doc Sullivan doesn't think she'll make it through the night." Nathan hesitated, then added, "She had a baby with her, a little girl about 6 months old. The child wasn't hurt in the accident, thank God, but she'll be an orphan," Abigail finished for him, her heart constricting at the thought. Nathan nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a question he didn't need to voice aloud. "Where is the baby now?" Abigail asked. "With Mrs. Sullivan. She can care for her temporarily, but the child will likely be sent to an orphanage in Sacramento if no one claims her." He squeezed Abigail's hand. "I didn't want to make this decision without you, but when I saw that little girl, all I could think was that maybe this was God's way of giving us a family." Abigail's mind raced with the implications. A child, a baby who needed parents, a home, love. "Do you think we could be parents to her, I mean?" "I think we could be exactly what she needs," Nathan said, certainty in his voice. "And maybe she's exactly what we need too." The next morning they rode into town together. The young mother had passed away during the night, just as the doctor had feared. The baby girl, whose name, they learned, was Grace, was being cared for by Mrs. Sullivan, who looked relieved when Nathan and Abigail expressed their desire to adopt the child. "I was hoping you might consider it," she admitted. "I've seen how you two are together. You'd make wonderful parents." There were papers to sign, arrangements to make. The young couple had been carrying documents that provided their names and the baby's birth details. With no known relatives to claim her, the local judge agreed that Nathan and Abigail would be suitable guardians for the child. They brought Grace home to the ranch that same day. She was a beautiful baby with a tuft of red gold hair and curious brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Despite the trauma she had experienced, she was remarkably good-natured, smiling readily at Abigail as she cradled her in her arms. "She's perfect," Abigail whispered, watching as Grace's tiny fingers wrapped around Nathan's much larger one. "She is," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "Our daughter." The adjustment to parenthood was not without challenges. Grace woke frequently during the night, sometimes crying inconsolably for parents she would never see again. Abigail often found herself exhausted, learning through trial and error what the baby needed and when. But there were countless joys too. Grace's first steps across the kitchen floor, her first word, "Papa," much to Nathan's delight. The way she laughed when Nathan tossed her gently into the air. Alice and her family visited shortly after Grace's arrival, bringing clothes and toys their children had outgrown. "I knew you two would be parents somehow," Alice said, watching as Abigail gently rocked Grace to sleep. "You have too much love to give for it to go unused." As winter settled over the ranch once more, the small family established new traditions. Nathan carved a wooden rocking horse for Grace's first Christmas with them. Abigail sewed a special quilt for her crib, incorporating scraps from her wedding dress and Nathan's green scarf. They filled the house with decorations, determined to make the holiday special even though Grace was too young to fully appreciate it. On Christmas Eve, after Grace had been put to bed, Nathan and Abigail sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the flames dance. "I never thought I could be this happy," Abigail said, leaning her head against his chest. "When I was standing on that auction block last year, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine there could be anything good waiting for me." I almost didn't go into town that day, Nathan admitted. I had plenty of supplies, didn't really need anything, but something told me I should go. He kissed the top of her head. Best decision I ever made. For me too, she said softly. You saved me, Nathan. No, he countered, tilting her face up to his. We saved each other. The following spring brought even more joy when Abigail discovered, to her astonishment, that she was expecting a child. She had been feeling unwell for several weeks, dizzy spells, nausea in the mornings, unusual fatigue, but had attributed it to the demands of caring for an active toddler. It was only when she confided her symptoms to Alice during a visit that the possibility arose. Abigail, Alice said gently, have you considered that you might be with child? That's not possible, Abigail responded automatically. I can't have children. That's why Thomas sold me. But Alice persisted. Did a doctor ever examine you? Or was it just assumed because you didn't conceive with your first husband? The question gave Abigail pause. There had never been a medical examination, just Thomas's increasing frustration and eventual verdict that she was barren. Could it be possible that the problem had been with him, not her? With trepidation and a tiny spark of hope, Abigail visited Dr. Sullivan the next time she accompanied Nathan to town. The doctor's confirmation left her stunned and overjoyed. You're about 3 months along, Mrs. Keegan, he said, smiling at her shocked expression. The baby appears to be developing normally. I expect you'll deliver sometime in late autumn. Abigail rode home in a daze, her mind struggling to comprehend the miracle. How would Nathan react? Would he be happy? They already had Grace. They hadn't expected more children. She found him in the barn, grooming one of the horses. Grace was perched on a hay bale nearby, happily playing with a rag doll Abigail had made for her. Nathan, she called softly, her heart pounding. He looked up, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of her. You're back early. Did you get everything you needed in town? I got something I never expected, she said, her voice trembling. I saw Dr. Sullivan while I was there. He says, her voice caught, he says I'm going to have a baby. Nathan froze, the brush still in his hand. A baby, he repeated as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing, but I thought. So did I, she said, tears filling her eyes. It seems we were wrong, or rather Thomas was wrong. There was never anything wrong with me. The brush clattered to the floor as Nathan crossed the barn in 3 long strides, sweeping Abigail into his arms. A baby, he said again, wonder filling his voice. Our baby. Are you happy? She asked, still uncertain. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, he said, his eyes shining as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. I already had more than I ever dreamed possible with you and Grace. This is a miracle. He kissed her then, pouring all his love and joy into the embrace. When they parted, both laughing and crying at once, they found Grace watching them with curious eyes. Grace, Nathan said, kneeling down to her level. How would you like to be a big sister? The toddler tilted her head, not entirely understanding but responding to the happiness in her parents' faces with a smile of her own. Sister, she repeated in her small voice. Yes, sweetheart, Abigail said, joining them on the hay bale. You're going to have a little brother or sister to play with. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Abigail experiencing all the typical discomforts, but rejoicing in each one as confirmation of the life growing within her. Nathan was attentive to the point of hovering, much to Abigail's amused exasperation. He insisted on hiring a young woman from town to help with the household chores and Grace, allowing Abigail to rest as much as possible. As her body changed, growing round with the baby, Abigail sometimes found herself overcome with emotion, thinking of how far she had come from that terrible day on the auction block. From being considered worthless because she couldn't bear children to carrying a child conceived in love, it seemed almost too incredible to believe. On a crisp November day, with the first snow of the season dusting the ground, Abigail went into labor. Nathan sent for the midwife and doctor. Sullivan then paced anxiously outside the bedroom as Abigail labored to bring their child into the world. Alice arrived to help, taking charge of Grace and offering comfort to her brother as the hours stretched on. Finally, as evening fell, a lusty cry announced the arrival of Samuel Thomas Keegan, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. When Nathan was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed where Abigail lay, cradling their son with awe and reverence. "He's perfect," he whispered, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed and reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. "Just like his mother." Abigail smiled tiredly up at him. "He has your eyes." "Poor boy," Nathan joked, his own eyes suspiciously bright with unshed tears. "But he has your nose, thank goodness." They laughed together, the sound filled with the pure joy of new parents. A moment later, the door creaked open and Alice appeared with Grace in her arms. "Someone wants to meet her brother," she said, bringing the toddler to the bed. "Careful, sweetheart," Nathan cautioned as he lifted Grace onto his lap. "This is your baby brother, Samuel." Grace stared solemnly at the infant, then reached out a gentle finger to touch his cheek. "Baby," she said decisively, making all the adults smile. "Yes," Abigail confirmed. "Your baby brother." As she watched her family, Nathan holding Grace, both of them gazing in wonder at the newest addition to their family, Abigail felt her heart might burst with happiness. This was more than she had ever dared to hope for. A loving husband, two beautiful children, a home filled with warmth and joy. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about how life can change so completely," she replied. 2 years ago, I was standing on an auction block, believing my life was over. And now look at us." Nathan leaned forward to kiss her gently. "I told you once that I didn't need heirs, just you. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Samuel is a blessing I never expected, but you, Abigail, you're the miracle that changed my life." As the snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, the Keegan family, Nathan, Abigail, Grace, and now little Samuel, embraced their future together. A future built on love, trust, and the healing power of second chances. In the years that followed, the Double K Ranch flourished under Nathan and Abigail's care. They expanded their operations, breeding horses that became known throughout the territory for their quality. The vegetable garden that had started as Abigail's small project grew into a productive farm that supplied not only their family, but also provided produce to sell in Elko. Grace grew into a spirited, intelligent young girl with her adoptive parents' kindness and determination. Samuel developed into a sturdy boy with his father's love for horses and his mother's quiet thoughtfulness. To everyone's surprise, the family continued to grow. Abigail gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Catherine, when Samuel was 3, and a final son, Michael, 2 years after that. Their home, once a bachelor's Spartan dwelling, became a warm and welcoming haven filled with children's laughter, music, and love. Nathan and Abigail faced the challenges of ranch life and parenthood together, their bond deepening with each passing year. They never forgot how their story began with a desperate woman on an auction block and a compassionate man who saw her value beyond her ability to bear children. Each year, on the anniversary of the day Nathan had purchased Abigail's freedom, they would share a private moment together, acknowledging the unusual beginning of their journey and celebrating how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" Abigail asked one such evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their children playing in the yard before bedtime. "Spending $200 on a woman you didn't even know," Nathan smiled, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Best money I ever spent," he said simply. "Though I didn't buy you, Abigail. I bought your freedom and you gave me your heart. That's a trade I'd make again in a heartbeat." As twilight settled over the Double K Ranch, Abigail rested her head on her husband's shoulder. Surrounded by the family they had built together, a family created not just through blood but through love, choice, and the courage to believe in second chances. From the ashes of heartbreak and humiliation had risen a life more beautiful than either of them could have imagined, proving that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings can lead to the most extraordinary journeys.